My parents forced me to buy them a house, then secretly gave it to my sister. So I stopped paying the mortgage and watched their lives crumble. I always knew my parents favored my younger sister, Jessica. It wasn't obvious, but the small differences in how they treated us were clear. They pushed me to excel in school, making me feel responsible from a young age, while Jessica had the freedom to follow her interests without pressure. After high school, my parents used their savings and took out loans for my tech school. I offered to handle the loans, but they refused, saying I was too young to understand debt. Looking back, it feels like they were preparing me for something worse. When I graduated and got a good tech job, my success seemed to justify their investment. They were proud, but I felt more like an asset than a child. They constantly reminded me of their sacrifices, making it feel less like love and more like guilt tripping. Soon after I started working, they pressured me to buy them a house. I was barely affording rent with 2 roommates, yet my dad brought it up over dinner. "We did our part. Now it's your turn," he said. My mom added, "Think of it as paying us back." I felt trapped. I owed them, but their demands were overwhelming. I buried myself in work to avoid their pressure. After 5 years of long hours, I finally gave in and bought them a modest house. I hoped this would satisfy them. For 3 years, I paid the mortgage, even sending extra to pay it off early. Meanwhile, I had my own dreams, buying a house, traveling, starting a family. I didn't want to be financially tied to them forever. Once they had the house, the pressure stopped. They proudly showed it off, telling everyone their investment in me paid off. It hurt, but I kept my distance to keep the peace. Then, everything changed. After months buried in work, I decided to surprise them with a visit. I saw Jessica's car in the driveway and assumed she was visiting. She answered the door in pajamas, gave me a quick hug, and casually dropped shocking news. "Oh, they moved. They gave me the house." I froze. "The house I've been paying for?" She shrugged. "Yeah, Mom and Dad said I needed it more since I'm planning to have a baby." My heart pounded. I felt betrayed and furious. I drove straight to my parents' new apartment, demanding an explanation. My mom calmly said they thought I wouldn't mind. "Jessica needs stability," she said. "Don't you want your future nieces and nephews to have a safe home?" I was stunned. "That's not my responsibility. If they want stability, they should get better jobs." My dad made it worse. "She didn't have the chances you did. We didn't pay for her college, so she deserves the house." I stared at them. "She never even went to college. She dropped out of high school, remember? They refused to admit any wrongdoing." "You're successful," they said. "You can buy another house." I took a deep breath. "I will," I said, "but not for you." I left, my mind spinning. I checked into a hotel, struggling to process their betrayal. One thing was clear: I couldn't keep paying for that house. But how would I get out of this mess? 2 days later, I checked the remaining mortgage. Since I had been paying extra, I assumed most of the loan was paid off. When I asked Dad, he said he'd check with the bank. The next day, we went to the bank together. What I discovered shocked me. The bank manager, a friendly woman, pulled up my dad's account and reviewed the mortgage details. Something seemed off. "I think there's a mistake," I said. "I've been sending more than the required amount. Shouldn't the balance be lower?" She looked confused. "Let me check the transaction history." As she scrolled, her smile faded. Dad shifted uncomfortably. "I'm sure there's a simple explanation," he muttered, avoiding my eyes. My heart pounded. A terrible feeling crept over me. I opened my banking app, showing the manager proof of my extra payments. "Look," I said, my voice shaking. "I've been paying nearly a third more than required every month." The manager's eyes widened. She looked from my phone to the computer, then turned to my dad. "Sir, why don't the deposit amounts match the mortgage payments?" Dad cleared his throat, his face reddening. "Well, we used the extra money for other expenses." A cold feeling spread through me. "Other expenses?" I repeated. He hesitated. "We used it to pay rent for our apartment." I felt like I'd been punched. My head spun. I had sacrificed so much, thinking I was paying off their house faster, only to find out my extra money covered their rent instead. "You used my money for your rent?" I whispered. Dad tried to calm me. "Now, son, don't overreact. We never missed a mortgage payment, did we?" "Not a big deal," I exploded. "You tricked me into buying you a house, gave it to Jessica without telling me, and used my money for rent? How can you say this isn't a big deal?" Dad's face hardened. "Don't you dare raise your voice at me," he snapped. "We sacrificed everything to put you through school. You owe us." Tears burned my eyes as I clenched my fists. "I've already paid you back. I've spent more on this mortgage than you ever did on my education." I couldn't stay another second. I pushed my chair back and stormed out, ignoring Dad calling after me. I walked aimlessly, my mind spinning. Anger, betrayal, hurt. It was too much. I sat on a park bench, burying my face in my hands. How could my own parents do this? My phone buzzed, calls and messages from Mom, Dad, and Jessica. They begged me to talk, but I ignored them. I was done. That night I made a decision. I wouldn't let them use me anymore. I wouldn't send another cent for that mortgage. When the first of the month arrived, I didn't make the payment. It felt strange, like breaking a habit, but the promise had already been broken by their lies and greed. As expected, Dad called. When I didn't answer, he left desperate voicemails. I blocked him, then Mom, then Jessica, even her husband. I needed to cut all ties. They didn't give up. Calls came from unknown numbers, their voices panicked. You can't stop paying. We don't have the money. I blocked those too, feeling a grim satisfaction. 3 days later, Dad showed up at my apartment furious. You can't abandon us like this, he shouted. We raised you. We paid for your education. Who do you think you are? I met his gaze steady. I've already paid you back. I spent more on that mortgage than you ever did on my schooling. I owe you nothing. His face darkened. He called me ungrateful, selfish, a disgrace, but his words no longer affected me. I had built a shield against their guilt-tripping. You made your choice, I said. Now live with the consequences. I walked past him, got in my car, and drove away without looking back. The calls and messages kept coming. Pleas, threats, guilt trips. Mom left tearful voicemails claiming financial ruin. Jessica accused me of ruining her family's future. You're so selfish, she hissed. But their words felt empty. For years, I had sacrificed my dreams to meet their demands. No more. Months passed. The bank sent warnings. I imagined my parents scrambling, draining their savings, maybe even turning to Jessica for help. Then, the inevitable. The house was auctioned off. Jessica and her husband moved out. Drowning in debt, my parents downsized to a small apartment. A distant relative told me. They had lost everything, and for the first time, I felt free. They had tried to use me, playing on my guilt, but their greed pushed too far. They lost their home, their daughter's loyalty, and their son's love. I had finally broken free. Life moved on. I focused on work, found a new apartment, a quiet space where I could finally breathe. The silence was healing. Occasionally, I heard updates through relatives. My parents drained their savings trying to keep the house, even cashing in their retirement funds. Now they were struggling. There were whispers of tension with Jessica. They had asked her and her husband to help with the mortgage, but she refused, insisting the house had been a gift. Realizing they had been deceived by the daughter they favored must have been a bitter pill to swallow. In the end, the bank auctioned the house. Dad got back only a small portion, the down payment and a fraction of what he had paid over the years. It wasn't much, but still more than they had spent on my education. Financially, the debt was settled. I didn't expect or want that money. It was just another reminder of their betrayal. But deep down, I felt satisfied. They could never again claim I owed them. I had paid them back, with interest. They moved into a smaller apartment, cutting expenses as much as possible. People said they were determined to be independent in old age. They also cut ties with Jessica, forcing her to take responsibility for her own life. It seemed they were finally facing the consequences of their choices. As for me, I started saving. Again, but this time for myself. My future, my dreams. I imagined a small house, a place to settle down, free of painful memories. Letting go of my parents wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, guilt, but I knew I deserved better. Love that wasn't tied to money. Their betrayal left scars, but I was healing, slowly but surely. I was building a new life, one that followed my own path. And whenever memories overwhelmed me, I reminded myself, I am free. Just when I thought everything had settled, a new problem appeared. Dad showed up at my doorstep, unannounced and unwelcome. Somehow he had gathered enough money for a plane ticket, traveling all that way just to demand something from me again. He wanted me to buy them another house. After all the lies, the manipulation, he still had the nerve to ask. He spoke of sacrifices, of their duty as parents, of the comfortable retirement they deserved. He even mentioned Jessica, as if giving her a house justified his request. We deserve a house, he said arrogantly. We've done our part. I stared at him, a mix of disbelief and anger. You had your chance, I said firmly. You wasted it. When you gave the house to Jessica, if you want another one, ask her to buy it for you. He tried to argue, guilt-trip me, convince me I still owed him, but I refused to give in. My savings are for my own home, I said. I'm not rescuing you again. He stayed a few days, thinking he could wear me down, but I had a work trip coming up, my perfect excuse to leave. Before I left, I blocked his number again, cutting the last thread of connection. By the time I returned, he was gone. The apartment was quiet, but his presence lingered. I cleaned every corner, scrubbing away the last traces of his visit, trying to shake the unease he left behind. Then I focused on work, on saving money. The thought of having my own home, one I had earned, kept me motivated. It wasn't just about owning a house. It was about proving to myself that I could stand on my own, that I didn't need them anymore. And then, one day, it happened. I had saved enough. I found a small house, a cozy cottage with a garden, a place that was truly mine. When I signed the papers and held the keys, emotions flooded through me. This was it, my fresh start. I stood in the living room, watching sunlight stream through the windows, dust floating in the air. The house was small, a simple cottage with an old wooden porch and an overgrown garden, but it was mine. Every inch of it belonged to me. I took the advice of kind strangers online. I told no one. No social media posts, no casual conversations. Only a small group of trusted friends, people with no ties to my family, knew about my new home. I couldn't risk my parents finding out. I couldn't risk them showing up, demanding to stay, claiming a right to what I had worked so hard for. I even joked with my friends about installing an electric fence to keep nosy parents away. But mostly I kept quiet, enjoying the peace that came with keeping things to myself. Now, the real task began. The house stood empty, a blank canvas waiting for color. Decorating was never my strength. I had always relied on roommates or landlords to set up my living spaces. Staring at the bare house, I felt lost. So, I turned to the internet, looking up tips on furniture, colors, and decor. I spent hours scrolling through websites, reading blogs, and watching videos, trying to grasp the basics. Little by little, I filled the space. A cozy sofa, a sturdy dining table, a comfortable bed. I chose warm tones, natural textures, and simple designs, creating a soothing environment. Then I turned to the garden. I pulled weeds, planted flowers and herbs, and set up a small patio to relax in the morning sun. It was a labor of love, a way to connect with nature. As the house came together, so did my sense of belonging. The past still lingered, but it no longer weighed me down. I had built a home, a safe haven that symbolized my resilience. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the garden, I sat on the porch with a warm cup of tea and felt at peace. This was my home, my comfort, my new beginning. Story 2. Picture this. It's my 15th birthday. I wake up to my parents beaming, telling me they've planned a surprise family trip. As the youngest, big surprises like this aren't common for me, so I'm thrilled. I pack my bags, buzzing with excitement. But when I head downstairs, only my older sister Alex is there. No parents, just Alex, wearing that smug grin she gets when things are about to go badly for me. Turns out, there was never a family trip for me. Alex, the golden child, had convinced our parents she deserved a vacation while I needed to stay home and study for exams. She hands me a list of chores. "Consider it a gift," she says, her voice dripping with fake kindness. "You'll have so much time to study." I felt devastated. I wanted to scream, cry, maybe ruin her perfectly styled hair, but I refused to let her see my pain. Silently, I carried my bags back upstairs and waited until I heard the front door shut. Then, the tears came. Alex had always disliked me. I knew that, and I knew our parents favored her. But this was a new level of cruelty. They didn't even tell me themselves. They let Alex do it. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. So I did something they'd never see coming. With the house to myself, I sneaked into Dad's office and made calls. His contact list was open on his laptop, so I used it. One by one, I invited his business associates to a grand anniversary party for my parents that very night. I did the same with Mom's contacts. Their devices weren't secured, so it was easy. To make things even better, I sent Alex's boyfriend a message inviting him too, and of course I invited my own friends. By 7 p.m., the house was packed with confused guests, wondering where the anniversary couple was. I kept my cool. "It's a surprise," I told them. Once everyone arrived, I gathered them for a group picture. Then I told them the truth. I explained everything. How my parents had left me alone on my birthday. How they always put Alex first. How my life felt like a Cinderella story without the magic. Then I pulled out the list of chores as proof. Alex's boyfriend, standing quietly in the corner, looked like he'd seen a ghost. The guests were stunned. Some left without a word. Others stayed to comfort me. For a moment, I felt bad for making them uncomfortable. But honestly, I didn't regret it. Then, I sent the group photo to my parents and Alex with a message. "Had some friends over for my birthday today. Guess it's time to start working on that long chore list now." Their reaction was instant. They booked a flight home, but I didn't wait. I blocked them all and went straight to my best friend Fiona's house. Her family had always been kind, always telling me I was welcome anytime. This time, I finally took them up on it. I wasn't sure how long I could stay, but I was grateful to have them. The next day, my parents showed up at Fiona's house. Her parents refused to let them in, but when they made legal threats, I got scared and agreed to talk. They were furious. They yelled, saying I had ruined their reputation by exposing our family problems. I couldn't hold back. I shouted back, telling them they had ruined my life. It turned into a screaming match until Fiona's parents stepped in and told them to leave. Afterward, they brought up something I had never considered: legal emancipation. It was a lot to take in, but the more I thought about it, the more it seemed like the best option. The next day, I got an email from my parents. They claimed they kept me home to protect my grades and defended Alex, saying she was just being a caring sister. They called it all a misunderstanding, but I was done with excuses. I was tired of being ignored. I blocked their email and made up my mind. I was going through with emancipation. Fiona and her parents were incredibly supportive. They told me I was making the right choice and would stand by me no matter what. They even offered to adopt me, the kindest thing anyone had ever said to me. I still felt unsure, but I knew I had to follow through. We contacted a lawyer and started the process. Days passed, and my parents didn't reach out. I figured they were too angry or embarrassed. Through others, I heard Alex and her boyfriend had broken up. Not surprising. I was sure she blamed me. Then, the official emancipation papers arrived, and everything exploded. My parents lost it. They called Fiona's parents, accusing them of brainwashing me and ruining our family's image. They refused to believe this was my choice. It wasn't about wanting me back. It was about protecting their reputation. Through it all, Fiona's parents stood by me. They defended me, pushed back, and even recorded my parents' calls, which turned out to be a smart move. But things got worse. Driven by anger, Alex took matters into her own hands. One day after school, she and her friends trapped me. They dragged me into a janitor's closet, pushed me around, and then Alex struck me hard across the face. She called me greedy and ungrateful, blaming me for her breakup. Then she slammed my head against the wall. My vision blurred and I felt weak. She punched me while her friends laughed. I tried to fight back, but she was stronger. In the end, I curled up against the wall, crying, as she kept attacking me. Finally, after one last painful kick, she walked away. Sometime later, Fiona found me, still in tears and covered in bruises. She rushed me home, and her parents immediately contacted the school and police. I was hurting, but at least Alex would face the consequences, and she did. The school suspended her for 6 weeks, assigned her community service, banned her from prom, and made her take finals separately. It wasn't enough, but it was something. The biggest shock came when my parents, desperate to protect their image, legally cut ties with me. They signed the documents, removing themselves from my life. Their decision was cold, but honestly, it felt like a weight lifted. Meanwhile, Fiona's parents continued the adoption process. They became the family I had always longed for. As for Alex, she was no longer my concern. I focused on my exams, trying to block out the chaos. My grades weren't perfect, but I passed, and that felt like a victory. I was finally moving forward, leaving behind the pain and negativity that had controlled my life. Life with my new family was wonderful. Fiona's parents, now officially my mom and dad, treated me with kindness and genuine care. They gave me the love and support my biological parents never had. Fiona became the sister I had always wanted, always by my side, always standing up for me. A few weeks after my exams, the adoption was finalized just in time for summer break. We celebrated with a backyard cookout filled with food, swimming, and laughter. For the first time, I truly felt like I belonged. When school started, I felt both nervous and excited. I hadn't seen Alex since the attack and hoped she had transferred. Luckily, my wish came true. My old parents had moved away, taking her with them. I no longer had to worry about running into her. Some of her former friends were still at school, but they kept their distance. Maybe they realized I wasn't someone they could push around anymore, or maybe they feared my new parents, who fiercely protected me. As for my old parents, I never heard from them again, and I was fine with that. They made their choice, and I made mine. I had a real family now, and that was all that mattered. I focused on school, joined clubs, and even started dating a kind, caring guy from my English class. Life was finally going well. For the first time in a long while, I felt happy. Most importantly, I felt safe. The only thing that still haunted me were the occasional nightmares about Alex and the attack, but even those were fading. I was healing, getting stronger, and learning to trust again. One day, while cleaning my closet, I found the old chore list Alex had given me on my birthday. I stared at it, remembering the hurt and anger of that day. Then, without hesitation, I crumpled it up and threw it away. It was just a piece of my past that no longer mattered. I thought about all the people who had stood by me: Fiona, her parents, the lawyer, school staff, and even the police officers who took my statement. I was surrounded by people who truly cared, and that was the greatest gift I could have ever received. I don't know what the future holds, but I am stepping into it with courage and gratitude. I have learned that family isn't about blood. It's about the people who love you unconditionally, stand by you in your hardest moments, and make you feel like you belong. And I am lucky to have finally found that.